What is she saying? Jossie, stop doing that. Good morning and welcome to the Experience Church. We are just so glad that you chose to join us today during our live stream. We're going to be doing things a little bit differently today. Usually we would have a time of prayer and sharing before the sermon is delivered and then some discussion afterwards. But today is going to be a special day. We have some special guests with us, and we're going to be talking about race, about injustice, and about practical solutions to some of the things that we've been going through. And we're just glad that you chose to join us today. First of all, most importantly, well, not most importantly, but very important, is get your phones out. If you're watching on your phone or on your computer, there's a little arrow there. This is a perfect way for you to get the word out about what we're doing. So go ahead and click that. And you can like this video, you can share it, it'll go on your timeline and others will be invited to join. This is a great way to just spread the word and we're inviting you to do that. But we have some extra special guests online with us today and I'm going to let Brian welcome them to this conversation.
Thank you. So the last couple weeks have been really, really wild. They've been really crazy for our whole country.
Yeah.
We've forgotten about the coronavirus and
The
we've moved on. Right, we've moved on to other things. But I think that this is an incredible moment in the history of America. America has had a long history struggling with race, and it's really uncomfortable. And as a white guy, I've been thrown in the middle of this, processing it with my family, processing it with myself, and as general manager of 3 radio stations with the community, the radio community as well, and wrestling with what do we do with this. Suddenly, it feels like the blinders have fallen off our eyes to what people have been trying to tell us for decades and centuries. Suddenly, there's this next step in awareness, and yet it's still really uncomfortable because, well, it's not me. I would never do that. And yet my eyes are open. So, Milton, I want to thank you for opening this up to a discussion. And as Milton, chaplain of KTSY and Project 88.7, we opened it up to live stream through the social media pages for the radio stations as well, because we just need to come together as a community and have honest, vulnerable, candid conversations. Now, if you're on any of the platforms, the website, YouTube or Facebook, there's obviously places to chat and comment, and we're going to be using those in the conversation that we're going to have today. So feel free to interact with us. It's not meant to be a one-way conversation, but it means to be a community, the Experience family, and we welcome all of our guests. We know this has been shared a lot of times, so wherever you're tuning in from, wherever you found it from, thank you. Go ahead and type that in and give some support to whoever referred you. Put that in the chat and say thank you. Welcome, and we're really glad to have this conversation together, even though it may be a challenging one, even may not be the easiest thing to talk about right now.
Absolutely. And I just want to say very clearly, as pastor here at this church and as chaplain of Project 88.7 and KTSY, the opportunity for this to maybe be uncomfortable, maybe be awkward, it's real. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have to happen, and you're invited to join us in it. So just know that me being a white person, this isn't the easiest conversation for me to have, and I don't have all the information, and I'm looking at this as an opportunity to learn and to grow and to be a better spiritual leader here in this community. If you heard my sermon last week, you heard my reflections on kind of how this all came together for me. When I looked at who I am and the skin that I have, I realized that it's true that this skin does offer me a certain protection to some of the things that are happening out there for others. And I really felt God calling me and talking to me and challenging me to say, Milton, it's true, I made you this way. You have in your society a certain position. What are you going to do with that position that I've given you? Well, maybe he didn't give it to me just by happenstance. I'm not sure how it all works, honestly, but these are the reflections I'm having, and we felt like it was time to talk about this as a church family, as a radio station family, and we're inviting you to be a part of this with us. So I'm going to head on over and introduce you to some of the guests who have come to help us in this discussion. All right, that's awkward, isn't it? Just that weird walking over. But anyway, here today with me are three great friends. Thank you all for being a part of this. First, we have Pete Smith. Pete Smith is an old friend of mine from college, and Pete is. You're just a regular guy from the community. You moved here, you told me 11 years ago. You have a beautiful family that's with us. So thank you. Thank you for being part of this conversation. Next to Pete is Phillip Thompson. 7 generations of Boise residents, citizens, I don't know what the right term is, Idahoans, right? Is that? But you are also the president of the Black History Museum here in Boise. So thank you for being with us. And Whitney Mestelle, you are an amazing person. You put on an amazing event. You are an advocate for social justice and equality, racial equality, so inclusivity and change. So thank you for being with us. And we're going to start the conversation with you. You put on Tuesday night an amazing event at the Capitol. I've heard all kinds of numbers of how many people showed up. I know it was a lot.
Me too.
It was a lot of people. It was a candlelight vigil. And why don't you tell us kind of what brought that about and what the vigil was focusing on?
Yeah, my friend Jesse and I, we decided that we wanted to do something, and we wrestled with, is this a space for people of color? Is this a space for everyone? And so once we got down to that, and we knew we wanted it to be also a safe space and peaceful. And so we wanted to have this opportunity for people of color to mourn the lives of all the people that we've lost unjustly, unfairly, either through police violence or brutality and or citizens of the community as well. Mm-hmm. And creating that space in a way that was a vigil and not a protest or a riot or a rally is difficult, because a lot of good people want to protest, and they want to protest peacefully. But we knew we wanted this space to be a vigil. We wanted this to be a space of mourning, and we really wanted it to be a unifying event. And sometimes protests and riots and rallies don't become that,
yes.
or they start that way and then they don't end that way. And so we thought if we can make this a vigil and keep it that way, and really, really hone on to the idea that this is a peaceful space of unity and mourning, and really get people to understand that, it would go well, and it did.
It did, yes.
But the reason why we wanted to do that was for that, to mourn these lives, but also to bring people of the entire community together to be able to do that, in hopes that, especially the white people that attended, they could see, they could hear, they could understand, they could hear our voices, they could see the people of color that were there, and they could also see each other, you know? I'm not the only white person that cares about this, and so therefore I do not need to be afraid. You know, I do not need to be afraid to speak up. I do not need to be afraid to reach out to people of color and or people who look like me and ask them, what are they doing? You know, what are you doing to fight racial injustice? What are you doing to educate yourselves? Because it's not just about asking people of color. And I think that vision, that hope, it worked.
Yes.
I think so many of the messages that I've received and conversations that I've had, and just the tons and tons of correspondence since that day, was people saying, like, this made me think. This made me have this conversation. I will not sit on the sidelines anymore. Right. And I think for Idahoans in Boise specifically, to be able to see in a state that is so predominantly white, to be able to know for sure that I'm not the only white person that feels this way and wants to stand hand in hand with people of color in ridding our city and our state of racial injustice, was really significant.
Yeah, excellent. The image that will always stay with me is when the last name was ready to be called, and everyone stood up, and some raised their candles, some raised their fists, some raised cell phone lights, and you said the name George Floyd. I assume that was you saying
It was
the
Jesse,
name.
actually.
Oh, Jesse, okay. And it just felt so together, you know, like all of us were together saying enough or no more.
Yeah.
And I was proud. I was proud of our people at that moment.
Me too, and I think Jesse and I reflected. We've done so much reflecting, but
Yes.
just feeling like Idaho and Boise did something different than other cities are doing, and getting that response from other cities as well. We could have just been another blip in the news of a protest gone bad, you know. But for Boiseans and Idahoans to choose to really stay in line with what we were doing, mourning these lives and trying to come together and trying to make them aware that there needs to be change was really, really huge.
Yeah. Now, of course, your event and so many other protests and even destruction and violence that has come about in these past couple of weeks, the spark of that, the way I see it, is this George Floyd situation, the awful death of this man. Can you give me your personal reflections on that, and where has that taken your thinking, being a black citizen of this state? Where has that? What did the George Floyd situation do inside of you?
Seven generations. And how long you been here?
A couple years.
Couple of years. Where are you originally from?
I was born and raised in Missouri.
Missouri.
All right.
Okay.
Coming from Gary, Indiana, is like she said, well, Idaho's predominantly white. Gary, Indiana, good luck finding one.
Okay.
Okay. So for me, it's a little different. When I see, I didn't see it at first. My wife actually said, "Have you seen what has happened on TV?" Yeah, well, not on TV, on the news and what people are talking about. And when I saw the George Floyd video, for me, I was like, they're seeing it now. They're starting to see it, you know. Here's a man on the ground, and I really don't care what that man's past was or what problems he had. That does not give you the right to do what you did, you know. And for, like she was saying, Whitney was saying earlier, it's okay to speak up. But 3 officers didn't speak up.
Yeah.
And that's what stood out to me, was that 3 officers did not speak up. They saw wrong being done, and they did not speak up, even if they were part of it at some point. Hey, Joe, get off his neck. You know, that's where it hit me.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, I'm like, I hope they see it now. You know. And it is what it is. I'm not against you. And when I think that when black people say, well, whites, they're not talking about, I'm not talking about my homie Milton. I'm not talking about Brian. I'm not talking about, it's a mentality more so,
Okay.
you know. And I hope that, like what Whitney says, that people step up to the plate and start speaking up and talking, you know, because you do have to understand that when you start talking, they tend to listen a little more, you know. When the guy on the street corner or whatever, if they start talking, or the rapper starts talking, they're real good at twisting it or making it a distraction from what's going on, you know. And just recently, I'm just hearing all this talk about George Floyd's past. That's not the issue, people, period. That's not the issue. Okay? We all have problems at some point in time, right? We all have problems.
Absolutely.
But does that give anybody the right to do what was done to George Floyd? I don't think so.
Right.
You know, that's just how I saw it.
Yeah. Phillip, how about you?
So I think that's with what you said, and it's not everybody currently is framing, not everybody, many of people are framing it under this George Floyd. And George Floyd was just the latest chapter in a sequence of events and a confluence of events that happened in the midst of a pandemic where people are also shut in at home. So there's a high bit of anxiety to begin with. You have people who are fearful, scared. And then in addition to George Floyd, you had the shooting of a woman in her sleep in Louisville, Kentucky. In addition to that, you have acts of police brutality for those protesting what had transpired. In addition to that, you have an armed insurrection by white people literally screaming in the faces of law enforcement officers, literally taking up refuge at our steps and on various capitals. I mean, really perpetrating acts of palpable intimidation and the threat of violence. Yet you don't see the SWAT team called in. You don't see tear gas launched at them. And then this is just right off the top of my head. I mean, there's been a myriad of events in quick succession. This was just the most recent and the most glaring, because you'll often hear the defense that, oh, the police officer feared for his life. The gentleman was subdued, handcuffed, and neutralized. And the police officer was completely stoically calm. There was no fear. There was no exchange. And the gentleman uttered, that he couldn't breathe more than once. So in all shapes and forms, there was no threat. The threat had been neutralized. So I don't think it was this event in itself. All of the others have been missed or have forgotten, but it was this reoccurring theme time and time again, while you have a disproportionate number of people at home witnessing it because they can't go out, they can't go eat, and just other distractions that we get caught up with. America is being forced, whether they want to or not, to bear witness to the cries that have been launched for like decades. But for the first time in human history, we each carry the ability to record these transgressions in our pocket, and it's being put out. I mean, people think I'm speaking cheekily when I say, blessed be the smartphone, but had it not been for the smartphone, we wouldn't see any of this. And then you have probably the most callous of which is a lynching of a man by looking at a home that was under construction by vigilantes who felt it was their right to not only question, but question when armed, and then shoot him down. And the sheer audacity of the attorney who let loose the film because he thought it would exonerate his clients. That shows you what you're dealing with from a perspective and mentally, as far as, hey, we've really got to address this issue because we can't turn our back on it anymore.
Yeah. A couple of times it's been mentioned, the difference in reaction. You talked about, certain people protest and the SWAT team is called in. Other people protest and it's like, oh, it's their right, Educate us on how life is different for that maybe a white person doesn't understand. How is life different for the black person, the black citizen versus the white citizen?
I'll use the armed kind of protest of the coronavirus as an example. I don't know a black man who would feel comfortable getting into their vehicle, arming themselves, hiding their identity, and then putting themselves on a government property or a Capitol building with any type of rifle or any type of weapon, and not expect to either be arrested on site, shot on site, detained on site. I don't know one.
Okay.
I don't know how to say it more clearly than that, but we all know that there are many white males and women who feel comfortable doing that and understand that there will be no consequence likely, as we saw happen around the country during the coronavirus.
Understood.
But that is not a luxury that you get to have as a Black American.
So that's interesting to me. What you're telling me, and I want to make sure I understand, is that the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms,
Right.
the right to protest, is not an amendment that is equal across the citizenship of the United States in certain parts.
Right. Sorry. Go right ahead.
I would even say, I would say no to that, but I would say even if it were equal, I don't think that many or any people of color, because of the life that we've experienced, would even feel comfortable testing to see if it was equal.
Got you.
And I mean, one thing I would often say is rights are something that were intended to and afforded to whites. They were never intended to be afforded to blacks in particular. When those rights were written and enumerated and clearly dictated, blacks were property or
I
were
see.
not. And so I chuckle because everybody talks about, well, it's your rights as an American. I'm like, well, slow down. Blacks were not seen as or were not intended as ever being equal citizens. Hence the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, because they had to correct that in order to afford us of those rights. And there's many people, or many institutions, I should say, that are still operating under that premise. Because
Okay.
if you think about what you just asked, why is one protest met with hostility? Another protest, it's like, it's their right to protest. Jody Peterson is doing a project talking about using your white rights for black justice. And the whole point is rights are something afforded to mainstream dominant culture that weren't at the time of their creation ever intended to be expanded to them or us or the others.
Right. So it was fixed on paper, but in practice, it's not. That 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment hasn't really been put into true action the way it was meant to be. Is that what you're telling me?
Exactly. I mean, you could look at any, just even locally. I'm not going to speak to things that I'm not, intimately aware of. That even in Ada County, there's disparities along racial lines. As far as we're working with Ada County, Ada County Sheriff's Office through MacArthur grant to like diminishing jail populations, and we're trying to get rid of disparities.
Yeah.
The only reason why I'm speaking about locally in Ada County is because we've gone through the numbers to see that unbeknownst to all, there's a problem. It's not as prohibitive or as widely seen as the national average, but there is a problem, especially when the black community in Ada County is so small. But there is, again, a disparate treatment as far as a length of conviction rates, successful probation completion, the amount of time assigned for a given charge. And it all starts at that moment where you have the initial interaction with said police officer.
Okay.
So from that point on, you can't deny that there's a problem when we're simply just pulling the numbers and going through it. And then even in a population where you have underrepresentation, such as refugee population, refugees are massively underrepresented in the criminal justice system in Ada County unless you're black. Not unless you're a person of color, because I will never conflate the two of people of color and white, because you're still doing so on the basis of white supremacy, that you're either white or you're something else. We need not be concerned with the nuance of what that is. That's basically saying an Iraqi is a Cuban, is a, I mean, you know what I'm saying when you say, oh, they're colored, it's just you're saying they're not white. But the disparity only exists when they are exclusively black.
Okay, that's interesting.
That's Ada County. I mean,
Yeah, the Ada County. Right, you're speaking of your circle that you
exactly.
understand.
I don't talk
Okay.
about things I don't know about.
What other differences do we need to know about? That do we need to be educated on?
I think now that we're in this time where it seems like tons of people are becoming aware or woke, for the
Yes.
popular term,
Yes.
that there should be an understanding, because city leaders, major influencers are coming out and saying, we're with them, right? And I think it's really important to understand and kind of to expand a little bit on what Phillip was saying, is that white people as a nation, as part of our nation, so as a whole, have never come together and said, we want this to be different. We want black people to be treated differently. It's always been enacted through legislation,
Okay.
which doesn't work as well as cities individually saying, we're no longer going to be this way. And I think that's really important to understand because much of what we see happening in our country today is the result of the Civil Rights Act. It's not as if every mayor and governor in every state and major city came together in 1965 and said, we're not going to do this anymore. We don't need legislation. We're just going to change our mind. Right? And I
Okay.
think this is a point where we can say, we don't need legislation. We're going to actually take
Right.
action, and we're not going to require legislation to do that. And legislation is really important, and I'm for it, and I plan to fight for it. But I'm just saying, like, we've always been this country that has given black people rights through legislation, and people just haven't chose to do it. And I
Gotcha.
think both would be really great.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
That's exactly how I see it. It took 100 years, was it, for the civil rights movement to happen after slavery? Am I right?
I don't.
legislation
It's
being
legislature,
Right.
Okay.
legislation being passed
Okay.
and stuff. And after legislation was passed, here we are today, the present, and we still have these issues going on because of people not choosing to see people who are black as human beings. Okay? That, for me, is the problem. You know, this slave mentality that, here, I'm gonna be quite frank with
Yeah,
you.
yeah, go for it.
I think that white America, personally, has been duped themselves.
Okay.
Okay.
Break that down for us.
You're the history guy, right? Okay. Theoretically. So, is slavery how to be a slave owner? Is it taught? Or do you just be born and you know how to treat a black person?
The beauty of the slave system, chattel slavery, and U.S. history is that it was inextricably laced with how our nation functions as a society. When you can, okay, think about it like this. You often hear like, well, we had Irish slaves, we had whatever slaves, they had it bad too. Yes, you're right. But they also had the unique ability to assimilate into culture. You don't know when someone's Irish until they open their mouth. And then so when you have this creation of this notion of what they're now white, you're no longer Greek, Irish, Cuban, etc., it was done solely to create that other party because we had now created chattel slavery and only used black to do so. The fact that blacks were denied all legal recourse to lift themselves out of that, whether it be not owning property, whether it be not owning firearms, the biggest explosion as far as quality of life that you've seen in black history in America was shortly after the abolishment of slavery during Reconstruction, because there were decisive actions taken to include blacks in the creation of a city and the process and the legal process of a city. That's what also created the blowback. So it's not an either or, like, oh, we can't have legislative initiatives to force integration, et cetera, et cetera. We just need to, as humans, decide that we're going to accept people as equal. It's an and both. I used to hate it when my mother said that, but it's true. It's not an either or. You must have both, because one typically encourages or creates the other. Because if two people have never lived near one another, all they know is what they've been told that's predicated on hearsay. It's not even factual. So yes, long drawn out answer, I apologize, but you didn't need the beauty of the American slave system and American society as the stratification of people is that the system is so innate, you need not teach it. It breathes on and lives on without direct action by any entity. That's the beauty of it. And so until you truly deconstruct it with those power players that are in the system,
Right.
it just keeps perpetuating itself, and it goes on forever and ever. And that's the beauty of this wicked system that's been built. It's because you don't have to teach it. You no longer have to overtly deprive people. The system does it on its own.
No, I like your answer. That's why I asked it. You know, he was talking about chattel slavery, and then he was talking.
Can you define that for those who don't?
Oh, chattel slavery. It's like you're not even, it's the institution of slavery that was done in America. You're not an indentured servants. You're
Gotcha.
not.
You can't work your way out of the
Exactly.
slavery.
You are
Gotcha.
truly the equivalent of cattle.
Got it.
My only, your only worth is directly correlated to how much profit can I extract from you during your life. And that profit will also come by way of forced mating, because I can then sell your children.
Yes. And your children, see, an indentured servant, your children that are born are free,
Okay.
okay? If we were in slave times, our children, their children,
They would also be
they're
slaves.
They're automatically slaves, period.
Okay.
So that's the difference.
Gotcha.
Okay, so when people talk about Irish being slaves and things like that, they're talking about more so of an indentured servant, where they are there for a time.
To pay off
Child in the basket is saying, oh, I hate that, little Hispanic toddler over there in daycare, and I hate that little black person over there, and that. It's not like that. They are taught this mentality from over and over and over and over again, So when I see what happened with George Floyd and what happened with the young man, what was his name, Ahmaud, jogging through the neighborhood, especially the Ahmaud one, here is a man with his son basically hunting. And I don't have to say what they were hunting.
Yeah.
It's being taught. And as white America, you all need to step up to the plate and say, that's, to me, that you should stand up and say, you all are an embarrassment to me. Basically.
Yeah. We have someone, we talked about the Civil Rights Act. The 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments extended the constitutional rights to all Americans, including Black Americans. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 ended the Jim Crow laws across America. I don't think any of that is factually incorrect. Why, maybe one of you wants to elaborate on why that still hasn't gotten us where maybe the intention was for those laws.
Yeah, I don't see that as a question. Maybe they just were wanting to state it.
I see it. Continue. Sorry. This may be overstating, but it seems that we are locked in stereotypes. White people see blacks as the rappers they see on TV. Black people see white people as sitting in the woods playing bank is trying to pick off blacks. Those are both wrong. Both exist, but are a small majority.
So I'm going to just talk for just a few seconds, and then I feel like Phillip may be more equipped to answer this question. I think that, and it's something that I said in my speech on Tuesday, that the bias and the expectation from white people, how black people should be or appear or sound, is so deep. And it's really, really difficult to move past that, no matter how much education you have, no matter how much opportunity you have, because I still meet people weekly, and the first thing they say to me is, "Oh wow, you talk so eloquently." And if I was white, that would never come out of their mouth.
Right.
It would not, because
Right.
the expectation is that I'm going to be a certain level of intelligence. I'm going to speak with a certain level of dumbed down intelligence.
Yes.
And so I just wish we could get people to understand that these very small things that they're not even realizing, that they're not even seeing, the bias is so deep. It's so deep that people say that, and it just completely washes over them, that they're saying that because they're expecting me to be different, right, than I am. And so if that one little thing, the way that I speak, is a surprise to them, then their bias in other areas has to be there. It's without question, right? And so I can't remember the full part of the question, but I think that we're dealing even more so with bias than we are with this, some of the film things that we're seeing. Because no, not every police officer and not every white American is shooting black people in the streets.
Of course.
We know that, and we get that. But I think really trying to understand, what do I think of a black person? Who do I think they are? Do I see them as valuable as my white counterparts?
Yeah.
You know, do I see my black coworker as valuable to this company as I see my white counterparts? What do I really think? Unpack it. Do I think they received that job just because of the color of their skin? And really unpack that, right?
Yeah.
I just think those little things are, when I say like the people, and legislation is very important, but when I say citizens choosing to actually look at people of color, Black Americans, and say, I value you, this is what you bring to the table, I'm acknowledging it, and I'm going to choose to not assume that you've received this opportunity or this position solely because of the color of your skin, but also because you're valuable and you should have. And that goes for so many different arenas. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'll stop talking.
Do you want to speak on the Jim Crow and
Yeah,
amendments?
Jim Crow and whatnot. I mean, it's the beauty of the system. I mean, the system is predicated on its own survival. It's established in such a way so we can. It's like when you buy an automatic, whatever it is. You expect to be able to buy it. You plug it in. It'll exist forever, right?
Yeah.
If it's built properly, you don't have to maintain it, you don't have to mess with it, just plug it into the wall, it's going to work. That's what they've done with the system here. And so, yes, Jim Crow laws and those institutions were absolutely terrible and abhorrent. But what they did after they got rid of those is found other means to still divide and keep a given people lesser and with the inability of having access. This is just my own local vibe on this. The luxury I have now at age 43 as a black male in Idaho is my luxury of access. I can get, within a phone call, access to whatever I need to rectify whatever ill or situation. The reason why blacks in Idaho live disproportionately well is because Idaho, although it wasn't, I'm not saying a utopia, we didn't have the legislative history that segregated schools all throughout the 50s, 60s, and whatnot. I mean,
Gotcha.
schools were integrated in Idaho in the early 1900s. Not because we were some forward-thinking, progressive, we're going to all sing and hug together society. The group was so small, we were never deemed to be a threat. And so when you have removed the barriers that allow a given people to achieve, they do a funny thing. They achieve.
Yeah.
And so, but now you see, in the last legislative session, a pushback on that same ideology. I'm trying to create barriers like the eradication of certain affirmative action laws, et cetera, for government contracts. Even though there's not a problem, you're trying to create a problem by creating this division once again. Legislation is necessary for protections in most cases, but it is often done to maintain power. So you had redlining, you had mortgage insurance, you had GI Bill. There's always a means to keep a people back, and America has perfected that. Unique to our area is that as a state and as a city, we didn't have those same barriers, hence the difference. And if you continue to keep people separate, they only know what they've seen and what they've been told. So for the vast majority of people who have not grown up around blacks or a variety of blacks, and I'm not making an excuse, I'm just making an observation, you assemble a schema as far as if you're constantly bombarded with a given message, you assume after a while that the message is true. That's why propaganda works. That's why advertising works. So if the only depictions you see of black people put out by Hollywood, music, whatever it is that they think is hip, that they want to push, then you have not seen anything contrary to that. Why would you assume that exists? Yes, common sense would tell you they're human, so there's a spectrum, there's a myriad of personalities and types, but if all you constantly see is this glorification of ignorance, then you even if you didn't mean to, you indirectly assume, oh, this is what they're into. I, for one, am a complete pain in the butt about what I allow my child to watch, how I allow her to speak, what I expose her to her as what's acceptable and what we will do and how we carry on. Because as a young black and white, her mother's white and Irish, my ex-wife, she is going to have to navigate those waters accordingly. Long drawn out answer, my apologies.
No. Very good.
That's dead on. As a guy who comes from where I come from, there's this persona that we all are a certain way. We all have a grill in our mouth. And
Yeah,
we have,
the thug life
thug life or whatever. And that's not the case. That's not the case. These people are educated. They're teachers, lawyers, doctors. You have your thugs too. It's just a community of all these people. Just as a white community, you have your
we have white thugs too.
There you go.
Yes.
You have, every community has its problems, it has its good points. But they want to paint this picture that blacks are only this way.
Yeah.
And we're not. We're all different. Have
Right.
different things and different just like George Floyd. I don't know, I heard this, who's the lady that just went on a rant a little while ago? I forget her name. What? This lady, Candace Owens, Nothing against Candace, but how she was speaking, it was as if everybody as if the people in the ghettos, in these black communities glorify that type of behavior. No, we don't. No, we don't. You know how many mothers are praying and hoping that their child gets off the corner? You know how many teachers and doctors and lawyers are telling these people on a constant daily basis, hey, better yourself, get better. We're not in these communities trying to glorify and uplift this type of behavior. Mm-hmm. I just want people to know that, So don't sit there and say that when it's not true.
Yeah.
And that's that mentality, as he was saying, it's a division. They want to constantly keep us divided. There's the house slave, there's the field slave, there's the light-skinned black, there's the black, dark-skinned black. There's the you speak so well, and then it's this constant bombardment on black culture here in America of constantly just like ripping us apart constantly. They don't want us to do this. I used to tell my basketball team, I said, it was a basketball team, so it's 5. I said, would you all stop standing like this and come together and punch the other team in the face? And they used to get a kick out of that. Now, I'm not saying we should go out and punch, the opposition, but they do need to be, we as people, as human beings, period. And I'm kind of happy that it's kind of a movement across the world, right, that's
Yes.
going on now.
Yes.
They're starting to see something. And maybe it is due to, like, the COVID. They're stuck at home, can't help but see it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a blessing in disguise, the COVID thing.
Yeah.
And hopefully we start coming together as human beings and start saying, hey, we need to do something about this evil mentality that's been under the surface since the time of the beginning.
Yeah.
We've
had a couple of comments about color blindness, to we should see all people the same, and I have to be honest, there for some reason, and I'm not sure why, I've felt wrong about that in some way, because I feel like right now, maybe because I haven't been recognizing the difference in the lives of blacks versus white versus Hispanics or whatever. And I don't know, help me unpack my thinking there. Is there something about maybe we should be recognizing color, but maybe we should be doing it in a different way? I don't know.
I think that it's a common phrase you hear when someone says, "Oh, I don't see color."
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm not racist, and I have no bias. And I would say to them, but the world does. Mm-hmm. So you may be saying to me, one-on-one, face-to-face, that you don't see color, which that statement to me is something that we should just get rid of. And maybe in a different time it could be said, but this is right now in the world that we're living in, it doesn't resonate. It's not really even true, because you do see, because if you wouldn't be saying it to me
If I didn't
as a
see
black person if you
Right.
did not see that I was a black person.
Right.
And so therefore it's obsolete anyway.
Yes.
Because I don't believe that is something that white people greet each other with in conversations about race, right? It's only ever been said to me by someone who's white in a conversation about race. So I think it's really important
Yeah.
to note that. But I think just the idea, well, I'm colorblind or I don't see color, and so it's everything is good, is dangerous, because if you are someone who is ready and willing to fight the good fight or stand up for racial injustice, or lock arm in arm or hand in hand with people of color in our fight for racial equity and all of these other things, then we also need you to be saying, you do see color, and to be thinking in the way that we're thinking, and not just saying everything is all good and fine and I don't see color and I'm your friend. But if you're actually my friend, you're going to come alongside me and say, hey, this is what we need to do. And I think a lot of times that I don't see color is very much a cop-out for people on their Facebook post, or their Instagram, or their one-on-one conversations with their friends who are black people. So I think it's really important to know, and this is me saying this, I don't speak for every black person, but for me personally, it's not something that ever makes me feel like you're less biased or less racist. I think it's a really easy way, I think it's a really quick way for people to try to escape the conversation, or not really dive in and get uncomfortable. And uncomfortable is what we need.
Other thoughts on it? The I don't see color conversation?
It's disingenuous, number one. It's dishonest, number two, because what color is your car? Oh, I have a blue car. Well, then how is it then, like, inextricably, when you look at a person, you're somehow, that part of your brain shut down, and you can no longer distinguish the hues of skin. I mean, it's so dishonest. Number two, it's dangerous because, as you said, if you really want to operate under this notion is that I see no difference. So if you go to a given institution that has 10,000 employees and 9,842 of them are of a given group, but they're purposefully refusing to deal with anything other than that, if in fact you don't see color, then you can't see the glaring omission there, or the issue if they live in a city where 80% of the people living there are the opposite. You see what I'm saying? That it blinds you to being able to address or even see a given issue. And it's a cop-out. I mean, it's so lazy that if you really think it through, it makes no sense. If you're saying, my saying I'm colorblind is that I'm acknowledging your specific background and I see it, but that's all it is, that I see it and then we're going to coexist as humans. I see your humanness would then be a better idea than, oh, I don't see color. And more importantly, not seeing color is a luxury afforded only to mainstream dominant culture wherever you reside, because you're then more often than not the power holder. Whether it be Han Chinese in China, whether it be you're at the top of the caste system in India, that's a luxury afforded to those that aren't being oppressed or who don't literally have their knee in somebody's neck.
Wow. Black Lives Matter has been huge. It's been on the radar big time, probably more than ever that I can remember. Can you speak a little bit about what Black Lives Matter is, how we should understand it, what are the sensitivities connected to Black Lives Matter, and how it's being used right now in society?
I would never speak for it simply because I don't navigate in that space. We've worked together a time or two. To my knowledge, Boise doesn't have a dignified, signified, this is the head chapter of Black Lives Matter, whatnot.
Yes.
Philosophically, obviously, it's a no-brainer. those who claim that it's divisive or there's a problem with it and they want to counter with all lives matter, then you're directly agreeing with my saying Black Lives Matter, because if in fact you feel that, Black, or as they like to come with, Blue Lives Matter, yes, the all, that would be inclusive in your all, as is Black. So the issue that you're supposedly drawing, you're negating your own argument. The sheer fact that you feel the need to diminish us saying Black Lives Matter emphasizes why saying it is necessary. The fact that me simply saying my life or whomever's life or my child's life or your life matters engenders rage or your need to counter it with, well, Blue Lives Matter. Well, they're not blue, they're blue uniforms. And all lives matter. Okay, but if you sincerely believe that and you're not just saying, I don't like the fact that you're telling me Black Lives Matter, then you wouldn't counter with all because Black is included in all. So even from a logical perspective, you just shot your hole in your own argument. So this should not be up for debate or any need to explain, yes, Black Lives Matter. And if you really believe all lives matter, then you also too believe Black Lives Matter. We should be done with this conversation.
So I'll talk about the vigil a little bit.
Yes.
And partially because there was some, as much as we tried to make it clear that it wasn't a Black Lives Matter event, because Boise does not have an official Black Lives Matter chapter. I will be frank in saying that I've been approached about being a big part of making it official. But I did not want to carry that name because we don't have it. And I don't want to take ownership, and especially from a national organization, one without their permission, or claim that I'm part of something that I'm not, which is why the vigil did not have matter in it. It said Black Lives Candlelight Vigil.
Candlelight Vigil, yes.
Obviously, for people, a lot of people that there was still like, oh, well, this is Black Lives, so the matter
Yeah.
it's just there.
Just went there, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
So I've gotten a lot of questions about that for sure. But I also think it's so interesting because in planning the vigil, just to kind of bring you guys in on the behind the scenes, there was actually a conversation where we knew that because we didn't have matter in the name, that white people would be more receptive to coming. Because anyone who was on the fence about the term Black Lives Matter or in that gray area of, yeah, they do matter, but I still, all lives matter to me is better, or that counter argument, we knew that having it Black Lives Matter, we weren't going to use it anyway, but there was actually a conversation where we understood that it was actually going to be better for us, even though it wasn't purposeful in doing it, except for the fact that we didn't want to take ownership over something that was not ours. So I think that's really interesting that there's an understanding that there's such a, just the statement alone is so offensive to people, and I'm not sure why. Because we're not saying that your life does not matter, and we're not saying that that guy's life doesn't matter or this guy's life doesn't matter. We're saying that our lives matter. And there's been a lot of memes and a lot of social media trying to break it down, and saying, our house is on fire. But our house has been on fire for hundreds of years. It's not a brand new thing. And I just want people to get that.
Yeah.
That this Black Lives Matter movement is fairly new as far as you're talking about in the span of our America.
Yes.
But the house being on fire is not new at all. It's just ebbed and flowed as far as its flame capacity.
It's interesting. There seems to be a psychology in society where if and maybe it's a thing of, there's only a certain amount of goodwill or opportunity, and if I say that matters over there, it somehow means that this doesn't matter over here. Why do we struggle so much with just being able to say, I can give to you and still have, right? It almost seems like if I give, I lose, and I think somehow that has to be corrected inside of our society. I don't have an answer, but I struggle with that.
I'll be short since I was just talking. I think it's one, it's become very political.
Yeah.
Is part of it, and that will be hard disseminate.
Yeah,
That's
for
already
sure.
rooted. But I do want to circle back for just a second to the Blue Lives Matter, and just talk about the fact that that is harmful to Black people receiving the justice they need, because blue lives are not actually a thing, as Phillip was saying. We are never able to take off our skin color. I am a Black woman 24/7, no matter what, and I will be until I am no longer on this earth. When a police officer takes off his uniform, I have no idea that the guy that I passed in Walmart is a police officer. But the Walmart loss prevention worker knows that I'm a Black woman, and they're going to follow me anyway, right? And so I think that's really significant. I just wanted to say that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. I have friends who are police officers, okay? But like she was saying, if they take off their uniform, you don't know, okay? And my police officer friends that I have, if they were one of those 3 officers that did not tell their buddy or forcefully pull their buddy off that guy's neck, I would have lit into my friends.
Yeah.
And they know better than to allow something like that to happen. And that's just the problem that I have personally with the Black Lives Matter, with people saying, well, we're not going to attend that because it says Black Lives Matter or something like that. I just say to them, look, people, like she said, Whitney was saying, this is a house that's been burning for a long time, all right? And at what point are you guys gonna come on in with the water and the fire hoses and help out?
Yeah.
Come on. You know, it's getting to a point to where people are just tired.
So tired.
Yeah. We have a comment. Instead of saying I'm colorblind, I think it's much better to say that I don't see your color as being anything that makes you as any less a child of God and created equal to every other person in the world. The fact that prejudice people see you differently because of your skin color makes me angry at them, in the same way that Jesus became angry at those who treated others with any form of injustice.
Can I say something to that?
Absolutely.
There's a difference between prejudice and racist.
Okay, break that down for us.
Everybody's prejudiced.
Okay.
Everybody. Women are prejudiced towards men are prejudiced towards women, Blacks are prejudiced towards whites are prejudiced towards Blacks, okay? Going to the Asian culture, they probably have their differences too, between Korean, Chinese, Japanese, whatever, all right?
Okay.
We all have our prejudgments of what we think
Okay.
cultures are or people are like or this or that. Racism is a hatred.
Okay.
Period. It is a hatred, and like I said, it is how should I say it? Taught. Just as I saw those people at Walmart, it is taught. It is a taught behavior to hate a group of people, you know? And that is the difference. So prejudice, everybody has their little preconceived ideas about people, right?
Okay.
But racism is it's a person, to me, racism is a person who is unwilling to get to know you. They don't care about you, they just see you and they say, I'm going to hate you no matter what. Don't like you.
All right. Thank you for that distinction. Anyone want to add to that? Prejudice versus racist?
I mean, no, I think that's, I would agree with that. I think it's, but I'll go back to say what I said earlier, that I think our biggest problem is not the just in your face, plain out racism. You know, it is the in between.
Okay.
So the just deep inherent bias, the people who are nice to you, you know, at work, but use the N-word at home. Because that's the people that we need to come with us, that's the majority of people. Like I said earlier, most white people aren't gunning down Black Americans in the street. I know it's what we see in the news media constantly, and it's real and it's significant and it's really important to look at. But our overarching problem, I don't think, are these like huge acts of just obvious racism, right? But the smaller things, I wouldn't even call them little, the smaller incidents that are bred in our corporations, in our schools, and in our churches, and those things, and when we change those, the other stuff doesn't happen. Because I'll be honest and say, I don't know that we ever get rid of the racist activities that are going on in these dark places that we don't know about, in these secret organizations.
Right.
But we can do a whole lot to change all of these people who are out in the open and interacting well in public with Black Americans.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. There's a lot. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to learn here. Thank you. One thing I'm taking away from our conversation, and it's been mentioned in a couple, you talked about history and how some positive changes have happened historically. Maybe in practice it hasn't gone as well, but legislatively but it's clear to me that what several of you are saying is that any significant change that's going to happen is going to happen with a whole community coming together, not just Blacks, but it's going to have to be Blacks and whites and Hispanics, everyone coming together and saying this has to change, right? So as a faith leader in this community, I want to see my church, I want to see other churches and our community organizations, I want to see us come together and make change happen significantly. What can actually be done? What can we do as this church is predominantly white, as I mentioned before. What should we be trying to do? What should we be learning? What should we take action in right now that would make a significant difference towards justice, equality, coming together? Do you have some recommendations for us?
My biggest thing is the problem is so vast.
Yes.
This notion of, well, where do I start? Where do I contribute? Take inventory and figure out, well, what is your skill set that you're actually capable of fixing? And my one apprehension about this sudden interest that we've seen, and people are out marching, people are out protesting. You've also seen like a huge influx in everyone starting a nonprofit or starting, they're going to rectify this, they're going to rectify that. But do you in fact have the skill set to do so? And number two, can you gain audience with those who do? Or are you partnering with other entities that are working toward rectifying that as well, and that you two can work in concert? So I know absolutely nothing about cars. So for me to start an initiative that I'm going to expose Black Americans and Black African diaspora to the beauty of automotive repair, I'm in over my head. Mm-hmm. It's just, it makes no sense. Right. So figure out what it is you are good at doing. And it doesn't have to be, we're going to expose them to the medical field because I'm a doctor. If they're not doing something that great, it's pointless for me to help. No, find those little entrees that you can give people access to whatever it is. Maybe it may be accounting. Maybe it might be a kid has an interest in zoology, so you're going to help kids get access to these resources to expose them to ideas and frames of thought and notions that they would not have had access to otherwise. Maybe you work in information technology. Maybe your office has 15 computers that they're 3 years old that we've never used. Wow, we could make these Chromebooks and donate them, and kids who have nothing would now lessen that digital divide. There's such a litany of ways that you can put the most slim effort into rectifying those who do not have access. It's not brain science. It's just being sincere and taking a step in a purposeful direction and not overthinking it and making it more complex than it has to be.
Okay.
I think the other thing that I'll echo what Phillip is saying is there is this like sudden, everybody wants to do something and we got to do it right now. And that's great because we want you to do something too. But I think something to remember, more than me telling you what to do, is to not stop doing it. When it's no longer on the newsreel every day and there's a
Right, of
quiet
course.
down, don't stop doing it. Because it's really easy to get excited about something when you know it's going to get a lot of likes and it's going to get a lot of conversation. But at the end, the three of us, we're still going to be Black Americans.
Yeah.
And if we stop doing it, if you stop doing it, if the people watching this stop doing what they want to do to fight racial inequality, then we end up being right back where we were.
Right.
And so I think that's really significant, is that there's a lot of talk of like keeping the momentum, but and that's really important, but just don't stop doing it, because that's how we end up right back
Yeah.
where we were. But also I would say, and I told you earlier that I grew up a pastor's kid. I think from the church standpoint, if you're asking me as someone as someone in ministry, I think that your platform is your ministry. What does Jesus say about me,
Yes.
right? So it's so easy to just give a congregation a list of books or resources, but to speak from where you already speak from, which is the Bible, and to do that well, personally, I think would go a lot further than providing a list of resources on your PowerPoint,
Gotcha.
that people watch as they walk
Yeah.
in. And I don't know if you guys do that, but I know a lot of modern churches do that, and I was just meaning that for example. But I think, and that goes to what he says, what he's saying is provide the resources of what you're good at. And so instead of trying to find this avenue of something new and do something cool or different, you're already doing something that's significant in your community. You already have an audience that is willing and ready to listen to you every Sunday talk about Jesus. And so I think that is really significant, and using that. And like I said, what does Jesus say about who I am? What does Jesus say about who he is? What does Jesus say about who he is?
I say, educate yourselves.
That too.
That's the biggest thing. That's what these two are saying. Educate yourself. Get to know your history. Go visit the museum. Good plug. Good plug. Okay. Go visit the Black History Museum here in Boise. Go see, if you see a black person, that you work with or whatever, get to know them. As a black person, get to know some white people or some Hispanic people or some Asian people, whatever. Get to know each other. When you start learning and getting to know each other and building a relationship, that's when things start to change.
Yeah.
But as I said earlier in our conversation, as long as we do this to each other and keep doing this, and and have our preconceived ideas about each other,
Yeah.
we never get that relationship built. In counseling, what's the number one thing probably that breaks up any relationship is communication, right? And there's this, like I said, there's this thing underneath the surface that loves to keep us from building relationships with each other where we can come together. It's constantly trying to keep us apart, And fortunately, God saw something different, okay? He said, I'm going to come down to you and build a relationship with you, I'm not going to leave you to the devices of Satan, where he can just keep causing chaos and everything. I'm going to send something to you. And not just send something to you, I'm going to send him, and he's going to experience everything that you've experienced. And that's the difference that goes on. A lot of people, they don't really experience, or they can't experience the black experience, period. You can't experience it, unless you're black.
Right.
you know.
Right.
So we've got to start wanting to get to know each other and build a relationship. Ask questions. You see a grill in my mouth? You know, I'm not on the corner slinging.
Right.
You know, we are there. Don't just accept what the media gives to you as far as what we are. Educate yourself. Educate yourself on, like I said, American history, and see how we've gotten to the point to where we are in these communities. It just didn't, if we can get out of those situations, a lot of us get out of those situations. We want to get out of those situations, you know. And it's just educate yourself.
Yeah.
And get to know and build a relationship with each other.
We have some comments. Best thing I've done is to make my voice heard. I posted something on Facebook that I thought wasn't that volatile. Welcome to Facebook. Some of my Facebook friends jumped on it, started to fight about it. I carefully responded. A few days later, one white friend called me. He had fought me on it. He said, I decided I had to look into this, so I researched it. I read websites, I listened to the voices of black people, and now I realize that I, as a white person, have a different experience than others. I hadn't really realized that. So for me, it's speaking truth carefully and in love. I think that's excellent. If you can navigate through the negativity and the attacks, because that's something that happens very easily.
Yeah, I tell people often that story is what changes things. It's an opinion, and I won't say that it's facts, but I think it's valid.
Yes.
I have seen more change in someone who sits with me or sits with another person of color. And I don't say that to put the burden on us, because the burden has been on us from day one. And so I just want to preface this by saying that to everyone watching, don't go out and find your friend or friends of people of color and demand that they sit with you and have a conversation, because it's important to educate yourself. But story is what changes things. And so being willing and able, when you get the opportunity, to listen to someone who looks like me and don't say, well, but. Really listen.
Yes.
You know, when I tell you of an experience I had, don't try to find the good in it or the maybe, or maybe that person wasn't doing that. Just listen.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the thing that I've been most frustrated about with Ahmaud and with George Floyd, is the amount of well butts has, although it's not surprising, has been more frustrating than any other time, because it seems like even when it's clear, even when it's obvious, even when I can't seem to think, how could anyone watch this video or know this story and still say, well, but it's happening by dozens of people. And I just can't understand how you can watch someone lose their life. And Ahmaud's story is the one for me that is so concerning that citizens of this country can watch these two men kill someone and still say, well, but he did this when he was 18. Because I am thinking, I don't understand. There's no circumstance. Right? In my mind. And so I just think that it's really important to listen to people of color. I won't rant and not say, well, but.
Yeah. And I would add, as a faith leader or pastor of a church, another thing that we fall into the trap of is spiritualizing these situations, and you know, all things work together for good, and all these kind of Christian-y statements, which I feel like at this moment are so inappropriate, because there's so much pain and there's so much questioning and there's so much anger. This doesn't help. it actually puts more fuel to the fire. And I would say, I love what you said. The time is right now is to listen. And to not even have a comment, just sit and listen and let the pain flow and embrace it at the moment for what it is, which is a portion of our people that are just so hurt and damaged right now by the things that are being done to them. And it's not time for God is good all the time. You know, it's time for real sit down and let's be there for one another. We have another comment, a recommendation, a book by Dr. Drew G. Ihart called Trouble I've Seen. It's about systemic racism in the church. I'm a United Methodist pastor, and I'm offering an online book discussion. Please email me at wilsonjenny@gmail.com. Okay, if you'd like to be a part.
We're actually doing that with her within Black History Museum.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so
okay.
It's odd to me because people somehow think that anything religious will somehow be separate from what's done by humans, either though it's the humans that are running the religious institution. And so regardless of your spiritual tradition, the institution that now claims to profess and practice what that initial sage taught, in most cases, fails to encapsulate the glory that original sage taught.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know of any religious tradition that the entity that they hold, whether it be holy or dear or whatever level they give it, that didn't have a message of love before everything else. But our institutions have become a means to divide. I mean, in my own tradition, we have a bunch of little subdivisions within the congregation that nobody really wants to talk about, but we all know they're there. I mean, in American tradition, if you could take a branch of a given religion, there's the black practice of that religion, and then there's the white practice of that religion. Why do we have the two? Because my family came to Idaho, started the first black church in Idaho, simply because they were not allowed to pray alongside whites. I mean, my great-great-grandfather founded 4 or 5 churches. So this is not something that simply because we're speaking of God gets rid of the notion that we are still human, therefore we're petty, therefore we're flawed. So we have to acknowledge and work within that space, and that fascinates me that we haven't figured that out. This is a book discussion that Reverend Willison Hurst has been willing to take on, and I praise her for it, because it's a bit of a heavy lift, talking about the history of this unspoken racism in the American church, and that it shouldn't be something that we shy away from.
No.
Because yes, I'm a firm believer in, and I have faith in people of the cloth and clergy, and yes, it's their responsibility, hypothetically, because to assume they're able to do so is tough. And to assume they're going to have the support of their congregation, because in most congregations or institutions, you have a power structure. If those who are ahead of you say, yeah, you're not going to go down this road, you're not going to go down that road. You report to somebody as well. So it's not as simple as, oh, we're here to praise God, so it shouldn't be an issue. I agree with you, but it is.
There you go.
Yeah. I always try to remind people that black culture is rooted in the church.
Right.
But also, there's a lyric that I think of often by Lecrae. Do you know who that is?
Yes.
And I can't remember the name of the song, but he says something to the effect, people say there shouldn't be a black church, but they forget segregation started that first. And so, like he was saying, the black church came about by the fact that we were not allowed to worship together.
Yes.
And so I definitely want to just say to people that so much of culture for Black Americans is rooted in communities, especially in Black communities. The church is like the center ground. And so to wave off our concern or our frustration with a scripture or whatever generalized Christian-y saying that you come up with is almost a slap in the face.
Yes. I agree. This has been a great conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much for your honest and sometimes raw opinions. It's very much appreciated. Thank you for participating with us. Wow, we've been talking for a while. I just looked at the clock, but it's been great. So you've heard the thoughts, the need for education, the need for togetherness, coming together. Seeking out what we're good at and making that available to all people, making this community the best that it can be. One last question before we conclude. Are there more vigils planned, or are there more events happening? And I'll say this about myself. I feel like I'm not plugged in. I don't know where do I put myself so I'm in the circle of information to know when these things are coming up. So are there more events planned, and how do we keep up to date on what's happening?
It's not a plug, but I've
go
really,
ahead, plug away.
just the
No
last couple
problem.
days, I've really tried to make it a point, because you have seen the springing up of different people wanting to do things. I said, hey, just for now, if you're on Facebook, please put your name, your organization, and what your focus is, so we know who we can contact and who's running it. And then as on our website, the actual Black History Museum, we're revamping a few things. We're closed right now. That will be a resource to go find that information.
Wonderful.
Not because I want to, we're the end all be all where we're saying this is okay, this is not. It's because it's a centralized hub where we can actually disseminate resources and information, as opposed to what you just said, this inability to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
Even with Facebook, you have to assume that then people are then on Facebook putting it there. It doesn't serve any purpose.
Right.
So at least everybody has access to the web.
Okay, so Black History Museum, one place we can go. Are there Instagram accounts that we could follow, or Facebook groups that we should be plugged into?
I'll talk a little bit. So I've gotten a lot of interest in having another vigil.
Yes.
So a couple things I'll say about that is that the original event, so on Tuesday, was meant to be a time of mourning and then let's go out and take action.
Yes.
And so, as one of the main organizers, my personal preference would be that we see more smaller events and more action taking place and more education. I don't know that continuing to gather in masses. I think one person said to me, "I know it can be bigger next time." That is really great, and I would love to see that in just from the thought process. But my personal perspective is that it's necessary to do some of these events and some of the educating. And myself and some of the organizers are working on something that we're calling Inclusive Idaho.
Okay.
I'm not going to go into it right now. You can find us on social media. I know the coalition has a conversation specifically geared for white people on Wednesday. It's a virtual event. So you can definitely find things. I'm happy to share things.
Please, yes.
In the live when I get to a point where I can. But I will say to the vigil question, just because I'm on a platform where I can say it, because I've gotten it so much and I haven't answered it, we do not plan to have another one, but we plan to have a lot of other small events and educational type things that will really help people move forward in taking action. The gathering together is really important, but the action is even more so.
Absolutely. Excellent. Excellent. Very good. Well, thank you for everyone who joined us online, the Experience Church, KTSY, Project 887, and anyone else who joined us. Thank you for being part of this conversation. And please, let's keep talking. Let's keep dialoguing about this. And I want to say, as the pastor of the Experience Church, church family, we need to start discussing and deciding how are we going to move forward and what actions are we going to take to make sure that we're part of the solution in making racial equality something real here in our community. So join us on Facebook, on YouTube. Share this video with those you think need to hear what was conversed about today. And of course, you could always go to livetheexperience.org and find out how to get involved with our church, whether you want to volunteer or you want to support financially. So thank you again. God bless you. Have a wonderful week. And we're praying that this week you will experience God and that you'll experience love. God bless.